Duck, 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 go. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the 197th episode of the Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. If you missed last episode, you need to check out what we got into with Jason Swank. You can visit thesaleswhisperer.com/session 196. Jason was referred to me by a good friend, and now he is becoming a good friend. He built up a digital marketing agency, sold it for, I think, 8 figures. I think it was $13 million. But he is just a down-to-earth, interesting, smart dude, and he knows what works in marketing. I follow him. I watch his ads. I read his content. I participate with his live sessions. Just a super smart guy, and like I said, just down-to-earth. So be sure to check that out. Next week, you're in for a treat. We have Mr. Steven Sisler. I'm going to be speaking with him on the same stage coming up in September. Just confirmed that out at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I'm working with American Dream University, and it's a program where we help transitioning military who are leaving the service and coming into the civilian world. And I remember that journey as well. So it's a free program that Phil Randazzo is putting on, and he had me on his podcast a while back. Now I'm reading Phil's book, Mission Next, but I digress. Steven is an amazing individual at assessments, so personality tests like DISC and Myers-Briggs, things like that. But he has taken this to a whole new level, and he broke me down like a shotgun, shall we say. So I interviewed him for about 30, 35 minutes. And then before that, though, I took his assessments and we review that live, as live as these can be, but unedited. And he went through my profile, and you'll be interested to hear how he goes about reviewing the results and the information he gets out of it. So if you are in business and you need to get better at communicating with people, you need to first understand yourself and then understand them. Steven can help you do that. So I'll have links to his different assessments, and I highly recommend you take these for yourself. Anybody in sales, in my No More Sales Duds program, one of the big things that I have sales managers and business owners do is assess their prospects or their job candidates. And you don't do it right away because these things aren't cheap. I have you screen people and go through a certain process, and you can check that out at nomoresalesduds.com. But I have a very specific process to help you advertise, interview, screen. And once you drill down to the top couple of candidates, then you do an assessment on them. This will let you know what really makes these people tick. So you're in for a treat next week with Steven. This week we have Gabriel Weinberg. He is the founder of DuckDuckGo, which is why I opened that way. And this is a competitor, believe it or not, to Google and Bing and Yahoo. It's a search engine that doesn't track you. So I learned about him a while ago when one of those big security breaches happened. And, in all honesty and transparency, I misplaced this interview. I interviewed him, almost 9 months ago. I feel terrible, but I'm glad I found it. And I was like, how come this guy, why are we not doing more with him? And then I realized, oh my goodness, I didn't publish this. But in light of all of the security breaches that you're seeing, the way that Google and others track you and follow you around, it's nice to have a search engine that isn't constantly spying on you. So I have this set as my default on my desktop, on my iMac. I have it set as my default on my iPhone. And he is doing some cool things. You're going to like his story. He's very open about how he failed a couple times before he really found his calling, but he stuck with it. So you're in for a treat in this interview. And as I've been mentioning before, if you need to make more sales, and who doesn't, please check out MakeEverySale.com. This is my new signature program. I just finished it a couple of months ago. It's hot off the presses. We're updating it as well. And the ultimate benefit is twofold. Number one, you get lifetime access. Number two, you get real-time access to me and the other members in the group through our private group to help you make every sale. When you get stuck on something, when you're stuck with, what type of message to leave, should you even call? Should you send an email if you need help with scripts, if you need help with negotiation? You're going to have that type of access to real people in sales that have invested in themselves. So it's not just some gossip or group to just hang out and complain and whine and moan. So check out makeeverysale.com. And now let's bring on Gabriel. Gabriel Weinberg, the founder, CEO of DuckDuckGo, all the way from Pennsylvania, man. Welcome to the Sales Podcast. How are you?
Thank you. I am doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show. I heard about DuckDuckGo really only a couple of years ago, and I forget which one of the big privacy things blew up. You probably know, and I saw some.
There have been a lot.
There have been so many, right? But
yes,
there was some big breach, and I heard about you, and it's like I've always known that companies, you have cookies and Google, they can see where you are. You have your location services turned on, so they'll tell you, where the burger joint has the coupon and whatever. And people are like, oh, that's all kind of cool. But then all the privacy stuff really starts coming out, and it's like, hey, maybe I don't want to be monitored 24/7. And I ran across your search engine competing against the almighty Google. So can you walk us through your story? I mean, what made you bold and crazy enough to think you could go against the big guys? And what have you learned as you've grown your company? Because you're now up to what, 10 million searches a day?
Yep, right around that. Yep.
Yeah, very cool. So tell us your story.
Okay, yeah. So I, went to school I graduated in 2000, around 2000 in physics. So I wasn't really into startups or coding as much. And then I graduated and decided I did not like physics and wanted to go right into internet startups. And did that, except didn't really know what I was doing. And so my first company kind of fell on its face, gained some skills, really dedicated, decided I was going to make a career out of it. Worked towards gaining the skills necessary, and found a partner, hit upon a second business, kind of early social networking business that was pretty successful, sold it in 2006, and then moved down here. And one thing I really learned from that experience was I didn't really like that product that much. Like, I wasn't a user, and I didn't really want to spend a decade of my life on it. And so decided that whatever I was going to do next, I wanted it to be more mission driven, and I wanted to be like kind of tied to it in what they might call founder company fit. And so I started a bunch of side projects, really just things I was interested in, not really setting out to build a search engine or compete with Google, like you're saying, but more just things I personally was excited about, which was structured data and improving my own search results in Google. And so I started messing around with a bunch of different things. And then none of those projects were too really successful, but I realized that if I combined a few, I could maybe launch a search engine which could maybe have a compelling search experience. And so did that. And even at that point, it was kind of a side project. And if there was no interest, I would have probably moved on because I had a bunch of other things going on. But there was interest. And so I just kind of built on that interest over time. And this was back in 2008, if you can believe that. You probably heard about it a couple of years ago, but I was actually doing this since 2008.
Right.
And then, it slowly built. And then in 2009, 10, the product was something you could maybe switch to that was pretty good. And I was trying to figure out how to get traction. And so I really struggled with that. I tried to repeat the same things we learned in my previous business, and they didn't work. And so I set out to figure out if there's a structured way to get traction. That led me to write this book, Traction, which I also worked on for years and just got released last year. That's pretty much my story.
All right. So let's go back to the beginning. You started a business and it didn't work. Why did that first business not work, you think?
There are so many reasons why businesses don't work, and I hit on many of them. I hired
Very
the wrong
thorough
people.
that way, right?
Yes, I was trying to hit on all the wrong cylinders as much as I could. I mean, it wasn't going to work for a variety of reasons. Maybe the top 5 were, I didn't understand the sales cycle or any kind of traction strategy. 2, I hired the wrong people. 3, the idea was literally 10, 15 years too early for its time. 4, I did not know how to raise any money and did a terrible job at that, besides friends and family money, which I squandered. And 5, we built way too complicated a project. We didn't do the MVP kind of customer development, product development stuff you really should be and get iterative feedback.
Right.
It was a nightmare. But I did. When you have a failure, you can choose to really go introspective and really try to analyze it and learn from it, or you can just kind of repeat the same mistakes. I really did learn from my mistakes there.
Oh, good. And how, though? Because there's so many people that don't, right? They want to point fingers, place blame. If I had to take a guess with you telling me, you're a physics major, I'm going to assume you're more analytical, you're more methodical.
You're right about that.
Than the average entrepreneur, right? So maybe intuitively or just natively, you're more capable of that. But I mean, so do you think it's some of that? And I'm going to assume too, were you single when you first started this, like without a family? So
I was
wasn't
single,
quite as painful?
but I did have my girlfriend at the time, which is now my wife. So I was kind of already in a stable relationship.
Right.
Yeah, I do think, this is confirmation bias because I am analytical, and so it's kind of a hammer nail thing. But for me, that has really helped me in my career, being super analytical.
Right.
And that is the approach I take to these things, is really try to dig in and understand kind of what assumptions I had and where I went wrong with them and why, and really boil almost any decision down to that level of what are the assumptions, what are you testing, what went wrong, and then do a post-mortem on it.
Right. On the flip side, I would say you being so analytical, you mentioned it was one of your top 5, was that that contributed to your failure too, right? Because you were trying to make a product that was too complex. So was it hard for you to leave something out? It's like, oh no, we've got to have these 87 features because that's what's needed.
Yeah, so when I first set out, the overriding psychological mistake I did a lot was kind of analysis paralysis, too much analytical analysis.
Right. Yep.
And so I definitely did that. There are a lot of things to building a company and trying to get traction that are just non-intuitive. And I think a lot of the good frameworks out there that have been developed and written about in the last 15 years, when I started, there really wasn't, these things didn't exist. I really helped to overcome those like intuitive things that are wrong. So like you really have to do some non-intuitive behavior. Doing that iterative process is one of those, right? So like putting out stuff way before you think it's ready, even talking to people out of your comfort zone before you even, build anything. These are the things you should be doing that people psychologically don't want to do.
Right.
And I definitely didn't do the first time around, but I learned from that mistake.
So is it easier now? As you started experimenting and then DuckDuckGo begins to evolve, I was reading some of your history and your timeline. You were still a lone wolf for a long time, right?
Yeah. I said I learned from my mistakes, but I didn't fully learn from them. I did the thing that people often do when they semi-learn from their mistakes, which is swing the pendulum too far in the other direction.
Gotcha.
And yes, so my second business actually, DuckDuckGo, that we had no employees or investors. It was just me and my co-founder, and for the whole time. And in DuckDuckGo, I started myself and ran it myself for the first about 3.5 years before it kind of reached that product market fit. And then I went out and raised money, and then I started hiring the team. But if you were doing that, it's arguable whether that would have speeded it up, but it probably. And I just wasn't. I was kind of once bitten, twice shy,
right?
And just went with that. But I've since rebalanced. I think I'm in the middle of the pendulum swing now.
Gotcha. So I love your story, though, of taking on the big guy, because I hear this all the time from people that, I deal a lot with small businesses and solopreneurs, and, they're always bemoaning the fact, oh, it's so hard to compete against Walmart or whatever. Insert the name brand, right? But here you are going against arguably the biggest out there, except maybe Apple, all right? But I mean, in search engines, they own the space, but you're taking them on. And, I wouldn't say obviously you're not beating them, but you are growing and thriving, wouldn't you say, against the big 800-pound gorilla?
I think there are definitely strategies you can undertake in that situation and that we've certainly embraced. And the two kind of biggest ones, I guess it all boils down to one essentially, and then you can say it's a sub, is focus on things the big guys can't copy easily, generally not for resource constraints because they have essentially infinite resources, but for other things, their culture or their business practices or legal reasons. You can construct, or because they just have to pick a direction, you can usually construct a number of vectors which you can compete on that they're not going to follow you in, and then you can carve out a niche. And so for us, there's a few of those, right? So, privacy, you mentioned, we don't track our users. Google's whole business model is built on tracking in search and out of search. It's not really a place they can follow us. We think that's a better search experience overall, not being tracked for a variety of reasons. Like ads don't follow you on the internet, you don't get charged different prices, etc. It's just a better experience. But they have a really hard trouble reacting to that. The second one is just design. You have to pick a product design, and the big company has to pick their product design. By definition, there are multiple product designs in the world, and some people prefer others. And so we're striving for like a less cluttered approach, and we think that appeals to a decent percentage. And then the third aspect, where it comes to Google in particular, is they're a very closed company, and we've taken a much more open approach where we're open to feedback. Our actual results, our instant answers are open source, meaning that anyone can contribute to them. And so, but in general, taking a step back, it's things that the big company can't really copy easily for some kind of market structural reason. And the sub point I was going to make there that I referenced earlier was a lot of times that is that they're so big that the niche that you go after is not something they want to chase because it would cannibalize their profits. Right. And tracking is kind of another good example of that. Right. We can thrive as a business with a decent market share, and make less money per user, but they can't do that because it would shrink their profits too much.
Gotcha. So how do you become profitable doing things so differently, right? Because, everybody, Google is famous for their tagline, like do no evil or something.
Yeah.
But man, they're doing some junk. Yeah. It's like, does the left hand know what the right hand's doing?
Well, this is the beauty of web search, and this is also the beauty that startups can have a focus. So Google is really an advertising company. They have the search engine, but then they make a lot of their money from three other advertising networks, AdSense, AdMob, DoubleClick, that run on millions and millions of sites across the internet, where it's harder to monetize than on the search engine. And so they use that information to track you all across the internet. Whereas we just focus on web search. And on web search, you literally don't have to track people to make most of the money, because you just type in a lucrative keyword like car or mortgage, or I want to buy a computer, and you can get an ad just based on that keyword, not based on you as an individual. And so that's what we do. And, we think, that is a perfectly lucrative business model for us. There's enough money to go around. We just don't have these world, dominating ambitions outside of search.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm on your side. I did a quick search, and like it says in the top right, very subtle, but we don't track you. Do you think people are just not fully aware of how omnipotent this is, and really how invasive the world has become?
Yeah, there's kind of two levels of awareness problems. One is what you just said, awareness of kind of harm and invasiveness. Interestingly, that has with Snowden and all the reporting around it, that has skyrocketed in the last 2 years. So Pew Internet Research does a bunch of studies. Some they cover privacy. A recent one said that 40% of Americans now would prefer a no tracking search experience. So that's a huge percentage, up from basically just a few percent a few years ago, which means that the market interest is really great. And that's not even people realizing the fact that this other more dangerous stuff is going on, like they're charged different prices. This is just based on their current knowledge. The second awareness fact, which is more of a problem for us, is people don't know that we DuckDuckGo exists in that context. So they prefer something alternative, but they don't even know we exist. And so our main challenge, we think, is really just getting the word out that DuckDuckGo exists, that it's an alternative that doesn't track you, offers still great results. And so it's kind of like a two-edged sword there with brand awareness.
So why the name DuckDuckGo? Where'd you come up with that?
There is no great reason I can give you. It popped into my head one day. Actually, before DuckDuckGo existed, I have historically been kind of terrible with names. And my wife, I just was like thinking of names. I was doing all these side projects. And I was like, oh, that's a cool name. Somehow derived from Duck, Duck, Goose, but it's not like we were playing it or anything. Just kind of popped in my head. And she was like, oh, that's a cool name. So I was like, I'm definitely using that if you like it. And that way, and then it seemed semi-appropriate I could stretch a metaphor into DuckDuckGo for this project because it's like, duck, duck, and then go to like a website, but it's a very light metaphor.
So like the domain name, like Google is evil and tracks you and really sucks.com. Like was that too long of a URL?
People complain that DuckDuckGo is too long. We do have ddg.gg, which is just a weird domain name, but it is shorter.
All right. So tell me about your book Traction. So you feel like you've banged your head enough, and now I've had enough wins that you can share with the world how to grow their own business, right? It's Traction, how any startup can achieve explosive customer growth. Yeah,
I mean, so we were talking about earlier, I made mistakes trying to get traction for DuckDuckGo early on, and I made a bunch of them. Happy to get into it. But, essentially I went then looking for a framework of how to get traction, and there are good like product and customer frameworks for building products and talking to customers, but there was nothing about getting traction. And so I went out and, interviewed tons of people over years and then found a co-author, and then we really put this book together of the framework we kind of discovered everyone was using kind of intuitively that they had discovered, but it was never written down. And then we wrote it down and formulated it, and I've been using it at DuckDuckGo ever since, and it works. And so then at that point I was like, we should definitely get this book out. And then not realizing that editing a book is like the bulk of the work.
Right.
So it was another 2 years before we actually got it out. So this book is a really long time coming.
Oh my gosh.
Working on it for like 5 years.
So did you self-publish this, or do you have a publisher?
So we self-published a version last year. It went out. We sold over 35,000 copies, helping all sorts of businesses get traction. It sold out our like 3 different printings, 160 plus 5-star reviews on Amazon. Great. And then a publisher, Penguin, became interested and spread into a wider audience because it was never really in bookstores or anything. And at the same point, we had spoken at a bunch of places and saw people where they kind of messed up in our framework and really hit upon the non-intuitive things that people were getting wrong, and wanted to take the opportunity to revise the first edition and re-edit it completely with the help of Penguin. And so that's what we did over the last year. And so now the second edition is coming out now, and we added a couple of new sections. We revised the whole intro and re-edited the entire thing.
Wow. And all with Penguin's help now. So it's
yes.
Very cool. And when did that release?
That is releasing October 6th.
Okay, cool. So the timing is just right. We'll I'll confirm the date with you in a couple of weeks, but I'll try to get this to come out right at that time.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, and for anyone who actually gets it on our site, there's a bunch of there's a pre-order bonus. Basically, we transcribed a lot of the interviews we did for the book with some of the top name people.
Right.
And we're just giving those out to anyone who orders the book.
So, you should just plaster this all over the DuckDuckGo homepage, man. Just cram it down our throats, Come on.
I wish that were possible, but it's not.
So you've got a Twitter page for that, right? Traction Book. And the URL is also just tractionbook.com.
Pretty straightforward, yes.
Hey, I like the way you think, man. Very cool. So what compelled you to find a co-author, and how did you know you had the right guy to help you with that? So
what compelled me is I was running DuckDuckGo, and I realized this book would never happen. And what happened really is I did all these interviews and got to the point where I had articulated the framework piece and then started using it in DuckDuckGo, and it started taking off. And I was like, okay, that's great. I do want to share this with the world, but I'm running DuckDuckGo, so I don't have time to write this book. And the project really died essentially in 2010 timeframe. And it sat there, I worked on it occasionally, but it basically sat there dormant for a year and a half. And I just said to myself, look, maybe eventually I'll get to this, but if someone comes along that wants to help, then maybe they'll revive the project. And I had been pretty public about it on my blog, and so a few people had written me just out of the blue. I didn't really solicit, saying I really want help with this project. And I went down the road with them a bit, I think maybe 3 people, and it just never went anywhere. And then Justin came along as kind of like the 4th person, and I had a sense at that point then, knowing whether they would be good or not, because I could give them directed tasks and see if they complete them. And he was just great from the get-go,
right.
The right person for it. And so it was almost immediately obvious he was the right co-author.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a great background. I mean, looking at his the work he had done and getting acquired by Rackspace, huh?
Yeah, he's just got a good background. He just was also just super curious about the subject and wanted to learn about every way you could possibly get traction, so he could do good in his career the same way that I was interested in it. It was just a good fit.
All right, so here's the $1 million question, man. Will you run Google AdWords to drive traffic for your book?
I have no shame of promoting this book. But the answer is no, because we tried in trying to get traction for traction last year. We said we were going to go beyond even what we normally suggest in the book and just test everything just because it'd be fun and we could write about it. And we tested all sorts of different channels of the 19 channels we identify in the book. And some of what we did test was search engine marketing as well as social ads. And they just weren't very successful. And so we're not focused on that channel. But it is a good question.
So give us some tips. I mean, what's a couple of things that people can do? I mean, I've got 2 books, and they're self-published. One is very niched, software book on Infusionsoft, but the other is a compilation of my weekly whispers. And how could I get the word out? Let's say on the second one, which is more in line with your book. I mean, it's more of a sales and marketing, entrepreneurial kind of guide.
Right. So there's the general framework, the bullseye framework we call it in the book, which is the metaphor is a bullseye like a target, and you're trying to find the channel that will drive your growth out of the 19 channels that are possible, like the outer ring. And the framework is designed to help you figure out which channel to focus on right now. So there's applying that general framework, which I generally suggest in any situation, because it's very situation specific. And I can get into where people mess that up. For what we found for Traction Book, which might be replicable, is quite honestly, podcasts were our best strategy last year. And we're doubling down on that this time.
Being a guest on podcasts?
Being a guest, exactly like this. And it might be specific to our book. That's why I'm hesitant to just apply. And in every situation, I'm hesitant to do that.
Sure.
And the reason I say that and why it may not have worked is because there's so many business books, and the strategy is nuanced, and there's a lot of non-intuitive pieces. And if you hear us talk about it for a podcast length, I think you can really get a sense for that it might be something you should check out. Whereas if you see a kind of a drive-by ad of it, it just gets lost in the noise.
Right. So you're not going to guarantee me like that this one thing is the way? Because look, that's what the best internet marketers do. Okay,
I
just
know.
do
That's
this.
What everybody wants. And you know what? The main question that we get, and this is one of the things I revised in the second edition, was, okay, I'm a book. I have my book, or I have a retail store, or I'm a software as a service business. Tell me the channels that are right for me. Mm-hmm. And that is unfortunately the wrong approach.
Right.
And the reason is kind of non-intuitive. What it is often the best channels are the most underutilized ones for your industry or competitors. And that means that what your competitors are generally using, you're looking at them and you're being successful and you're like, oh, I should just go do what they're doing. But often those are the channels that are most competitive.
Right.
And that means that it's hardest to get traction in. And so it's often that these underutilized ones are better, but the only way to really figure that out is to brainstorm and actually run tests in various channels, which is what our framework does. And the problem is that's actually a lot of work. And that's why we basically advise at the beginning of the book very strongly that you need to spend half your time on traction. People mainly spend all their time on product at the expense, and then they try to get traction later, kind of after they launch as an afterthought, and they don't take a structured approach. But we really think you got to start from the beginning, and you got to be running these experiments, right away to try to figure out what the right channel is. And that's the part that people really mess up, because it's a lot of work. I mean, it really is.
Right. So basically, now, since you're a physicist, now I'm a closet geek, okay, but I don't let everybody know this. But I'm a salesman at heart, right? But I did go to the Air Force Academy. I did take every frickin' form of engineering under the sun, and all the way through Calculus 3 and differential equations, and my head still hurts. But for the entrepreneurs and salespeople out there, what he just said was, look at what your competition's doing, and you probably should do the opposite, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Zig when they zag. So I love it. And then, you say spend half your time on traction. I had Michael Hyatt on over a year ago. Great guy, big platform, and that's his platform is the platform. He's got a whole conference around that in a book. It's how to get noticed in a noisy world and things like that. And I asked him, I said, hey, I feel like it's 10% product and 90% promotion. And he dickered with the percentages, but, I'm trying to just drive home a point. But it's basically what you're saying, right? When you say traction, you're talking about promotion and marketing and getting the word out, right? Instead of just sitting in your garage, adding one more bell or one more whistle to your widget.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, I agree. Because the pull to work on product is so much higher, because it just feels like the path of least resistance, in your mind, you should probably increase it even higher than 50%, and that'll maybe get you back to 50%.
Yeah, so, it's kind of like in sports or anything. If it feels easy, you're probably doing something wrong.
Yeah,
exactly. Your exercise. I was out last night. My daughter, she's 13. And playing soccer. She's a very good goalie and really getting better, but there's things to work on. And she's like, this is hard. Giving her drills, giving her things to work on. It's like, well, hello. We're out here practicing because you asked, because you weren't good at a particular skill. You're going to be sore. My son, we got him a trainer over the summer for football. He was puking. Several times he puked in the workout. It's hard. And that's where the growth comes, right? Is when you feel that resistance. What do they say? Like a kite, only flies against the wind or something like that, right?
Yeah, the real key to getting traction in our basic framework tells you how to do it more, but the essential activity is testing. You're testing all the time. Yep. You're testing different channels, and then once you find the channel that works, you're testing strategies within that channel, and to try to uncover the the underutilized strategies within that channel, with the new tactics and cutting edge things. And so it's just endless testing, and most tests fail. That's the nature of tests.
Right.
And it's out of your comfort zone. It's hard work. Some of the channels that may be the best ones for your business are just like completely out of your personality. So it's a sales podcast, so probably not. Maybe it's the reverse of the people I usually talk to.
Yep.
Oftentimes people I talk to, they're like, public speaking, speaking engagements might be the thing that is good for them, and that's the last thing they ever want to do.
Right. Yep.
I don't know what is the right anti-cultural thing for sales folks. If it's, I don't even begin to guess. I don't want to stereotype.
Yeah, but how do people know? I guess I need to get your buck, huh? So they can see these 19 channels. Because I know a lot of people are going to be like, I don't even know where to start, and then they'll go waste time doing a Google AdWords or a pay-per-click campaign, or they'll, I saw somebody just the other day, and I'm making a blog post about this because somebody said on Facebook, Periscope, should I be on Periscope? What does everybody think? And it's like, if you're asking that question, then the answer is probably no.
So I hear you. So there's kind of 4 steps to our process. I'll go through them briefly. Step 0 is you have to identify a traction goal, a real quantitative thing you're trying to achieve. Feel free to make me go into more detail if you like. Step 1 of the framework of the 3-step process is you need to go to all the 19 channels and brainstorm them and really try to figure out, if you were going to run a test in that channel, what would be the ideal test to figure out how many customers it could maybe bring in, how much do they cost, and are they the right ones? And these kind of tests are designed to never be more than a month or $1,000, especially when you're starting out. So small, cheap tests. And then you pick the top 3, this is the second step, and run those tests. And then the third step is, if one was successful, then you drop everything else and you drill down and double down on that one that was successful, that one channel, which, maybe social ads, say, or content marketing, if it's kind of a Periscope-y thing. Then if you're in content marketing, then you start running tests within that channel, and then you maybe try like a Periscope thing or whatever it is in the content marketing. But you never go down to that level of detail until you've run the cheap test to verify that that's kind of the right general channel. Right.
Yeah, I always tell people, you're always trying to beat your best performing ad, right, or your best performing campaign. So kind of like what you said, you find something that works, drill down on it. But, I always use examples, like McDonald's. I mean, they've gone through, I'm loving it to, whatever. They constantly change. The Army, an army of one, or be Army strong, or whatever. I mean, they're always evolving. Coca-Cola, have a Coke and a smile. And I mean, they're evolving. So these big guys have to beat their own ads. The little guys do as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a quote law that we reference in the book from Andrew Chen called the law of shitty click-throughs. And it's that all marketing strategies eventually yield to shitty click-throughs. And what that means is eventually everything you do reaches diminishing returns, saturation in some way. And you hit the bullseye, you unlock a growth strategy that is working. You got to constantly monitor that and see when it reaches diminishing returns. And then you have to restart the whole process.
Right.
So at DuckDuckGo, we've changed channels fully like 6 times when we've hit those diminishing returns. And yeah, you're absolutely right. You're constantly trying to better yourself through testing. And then when the whole strategy reaches diminishing returns, you got to completely switch it. So this goes back to your point earlier. It's a never ending, hard-working process.
Yeah. Yeah. Like they say, we quit our 40-hour jobs so we can work 100-hour jobs for a madman, right?
Right, exactly.
So how does somebody know when they can figure this out on their own versus sub it out or bring in a consultant? Because, 19 steps, that can be painful. That can take a long time. But conversely, there's a lot of scam artists, BS artists, consultant gurus out there that are just going to take your money as well. But, it's like we're just swimming with the sharks, right?
I think that a business owner needs to own the general customer acquisition plan. I mean, it's so central to the business that they need to at least understand the strategy and help formulate it. So at the basic level, I think you can't outsource it, or you shouldn't. When you get into specific channels and being an expert in that channel, then I think it makes sense to get help. Even at the brainstorming advising stage, it could make sense to get help. But I would never outsource the entire function of customer acquisition.
Right. So you're saying like bring a social media guru in maybe to consult
once you've determined that you're on social media,
right.
and you're getting tactics within that. Like if you figure out that search engine ads are that you ran your own experiment, your basic experiment to validate that it's probably the channel, then bring in the expert,
right.
or even help them bring in an experiment. But I wouldn't just outsource. Hey, I think my business is going to be grow social via search ads, so I'm just going to give an agency $20,000 and let them do it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You got to be part of that initial test, and it should be cheap.
Yes. Okay. Cheap and fast. Amen.
Yes.
Get it done. I mean, and that's the nice thing with the digital age today. I think it was Wanamaker said, right? John Wanamaker said that half my advertising budget is wasted. I just don't know which half. But now. I mean, you can know within minutes. If you have a big enough budget, but certainly within days. I mean, I split tested the title of my next book, running some AdWords and just seeing what the click throughs were. And it only took a few days, and I need to go pull it up and see. But I don't think I spent more than $40 or $50. So, I mean, you can tell very quickly in this digital age, as long as you want to test. But you know what? I've learned that the hard way because, even though I have a technical background, I'm not an analytics guy. I'm not staring at my analytics as much as I need to. And that has hurt me in the past. And I'm getting better at looking at it, but it's still not my forte. I'd rather, stare at a blank screen and start typing a post than open up numbers.
Yeah, you're not alone. I mean, I think it's most people.
Yeah, because sometimes it's daunting. I look at it and you're frustrated. Like, where are my views? Where are my downloads? How come my sessions aren't going up? Why are my page views going down? Why are my bounce rates going up? And it's sometimes like I've put in so much effort, so much work, and it's still not happening. Screw it. I'm gonna go have a beer and just never mind.
Yeah.
But the numbers do tell
you. Feel you.
The numbers tell you what to do, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy job, and what you're accounting for is that most things fail. Most tests you run fail, and you have to get comfortable with that. But I mean, one of the things I've learned over my startup tenure is that things that feel uncomfortable at first, you get used to eventually. Like they become more comfortable over time, and you have to put in the effort to just get to that comfort zone.
Right. You just got to stick it out, right? They say anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you master it. Yeah. Very nice. So your website, so it's tractionbook.com. Can we pre-order it now? How do people get a hold of the bonuses?
Yep. You can pre-order it now. There's a link there to get a hold of the bonuses. You really just forward me the pre-order receipt and I reply back to you.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
That's simple.
So we order it on Amazon though, and then send you the link.
It's actually available on a variety of retailers this time. That's one of the benefits of going with Penguin.
Sure,
but it is also available on Amazon. Yes.
Okay. Very nice. Well, Mr. Gabriel Weinberg, DuckDuckGo, thanks for coming on the Sales Podcast.
It's been my pleasure.
All right, man. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay, so go get DuckDuckGo on your browsers, on your smartphones. Go do it now. Get the government off your back. I hope you liked this interview. I loved his openness, like I said, his transparency. He talked about how he failed in the beginning. Then he started something that was okay, and then he really found his passion. And he started out with something that wasn't perfect, but it was good enough, and now he's constantly iterating and improving. Seth Godin has a book called Just Ship It or Just Ship, and it's actually 5 little booklets that come in a package, and you're supposed to share it with others on your team. And, he says just ship, push it out the door. You don't want to push out junk But more times than not, and almost 100% of the time, you can put out something, a small variation of what your vision is, and then improve it. And actually, I think I was just reading Seth Godin's the book, The Dip. He talked about Microsoft, how like Word and Excel, those weren't perfect in the beginning. Windows failed a couple of times. Some of us might even say Windows is still failing, but I digress. But the point is, they push it out and then improve it. I'm an Apple fan. I mean, look at the iPhone now compared to the very first one. I saw one of the first iPhones, a few weeks ago. Somebody had it, and it was amazing holding it and how simple and really cheap and just nothing it felt like. But I remember wanting that thing so bad because at the time it was amazing. And so, but Apple knew where they were taking things. I remember how much heat Apple was taking when they pushed out Apple Maps. And they could have solved that problem by just calling it beta, but they were in, and still are in, a battle to the death with Google. And there's a lot of money, there's a lot of information in Maps. And so by removing Google Maps, at least from being the default, they knew where they had to take things. And they were willing to take the heat and the risk of pushing out something that wasn't quite ready. So they had the ability and the roadmap to improve it. They knew where to take things once they launched. So do you have the guts to launch? Do you have the guts to push something out when it's not 100%? I don't know about you, but when I do publish something, all of a sudden my proofreading gets really good. It's right after I hit send that I catch the typo. But are you willing to put yourself out there and fail and then improve? The old saying, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you get good enough and master it, and then you can do it well. So are you willing to do it poorly? Are you willing to grind through the mistakes and the imperfections until it gets good? And, that's what Gabriel has done. And, he talked about how podcast is one of his big ways of getting the word out over this last year. But, self-publishing a book and getting 35,000 copies, that's amazing. So he's doing a lot of right things. So don't only get his search engine, DuckDuckGo. Just follow the guy. Check out what he's doing. He's a leading entrepreneur doing some big things, and he will inspire you, and he's a good guy to have in your newsfeed. Another good thing to have in your back pocket is access to the Make Every Sale course, makeeverysale.com. If you want to engage with me in real time or near real time, join that group. People ask me all the time. They'll email me questions, whatever. I'm like, I can't answer private questions for free. I just can't. So if you want real-time access to me and other members that are motivated sales professionals, check out makeeverysale.com. And then please share this episode, share it with a friend. Help me get the word out. We're getting some good traction now. And the future is bright thanks to you. Thanks for listening, and remember to sell different.